Welcome to another Patishku, a bite-sized chat about current topics. This week I have a quick Zoom call with David from the Leisure Launch Group and we discuss off-plan properties. David, you're back.
Hi. Yes, finally I managed to get an invite.
Yeah, well, it's been busy. We've been busy on this side of things, but finally, you were a prominent guest at the beginning on the podcast and with some Patishkus, and you're back for another Patishku.
I must say the other guests have been a lot more interesting. You got yourself a fan, yeah. I'm always got it. On the way in the morning, I'm always listening in, yeah.
Awesome.
Except I don't have the wine. I don't have the wine thing, Roy Veloza had his glass of wine. Yeah, probably get fired if I come in with a glass of wine.
I think we're publishing one on Monday, and it's a guy who had some iced tea, so very sophisticated. So it's just well, that's what I thought it was anyway.
Yeah.
But let's we've got something to celebrate as well. If you remember, in the first podcast we ever did, we spoke about our choice of football teams was so bad. Not anymore.
Not anymore. Jesus, we've endured 19 years of abuse. But we never gave up. The green was in our blood. And finally, if the chickens have come home to roost, we deserve it.
So for those who don't know, Sporting finally have won a title in Portugal, the league title, in 19 years of trying. So it's a great time for us Sportingistas.
Yeah, the only thing that we had in the last 19 years to offer the world was Cristiano Ronaldo. That was pretty much it. Nothing else after that. No titles, no trophies, no nothing. But thank God we're back again.
Fantastic. Well, we haven't done a Patishku in a while, so let's also just refresh the listeners. A Patishku is a bite-sized episode with something interesting. And I wanted you to join us to chat about Offplan. It's not a new concept, but it's something that's very relevant at the moment. So thanks for coming. And maybe you can just start off by telling us, what is off-plan property?
Well, traditionally, off-plan was pretty much what most people understood it. They'd arrive at a plot of land and the developer would sell them this vision of a house to be built, a house or an apartment to be built in the future. Over the years, certainly over the last 20 years, that model has changed. Although you still get the traditional model, traditionally, off-plan, certainly for my generation, you had a choice of 3 houses and you'd get there and you choose the one that you liked and that was it. And then they would build it and off they go. Certainly in the last 10 years, that off-plan has changed quite dramatically. There has been a shift in the marketplace. People tend to separate us as professionals. We tend to separate the off-plan apartments to the key in hand, which we've done before on the podcast. Key in hand is now more closer related to houses as such, and the off-plan kind of still very much around the apartments. So yeah, an old concept that's adjusted to the change in the marketplace.
Just quickly, why the differentiation now with houses being more key in hand and apartments being off plan? Has that got to do with the land ownership? What is the main purpose there?
Well, as business principles, they're completely different, or they've become completely different. An off-plan apartment, the land is owned by the developer. The property is effectively owned by the developer until the deed. So you could go into a transaction today and only really take ownership in 18 months to 2 years' time. Whereas key in hand is you own the land. You do the deed almost immediately. You effectively become the developer. You have ownership, and as the model grows, your risk profile is a completely different one. Where key in hand gained prominence is in terms of the expectation of the client. Apartments, there's obviously, for obvious reasons, there's a limitation to how many changes you can make, or how much, let's call it customizing, you can do to an apartment. Whereas a house, there's a lot more flexibility. You're alone, you're a freestanding house on the plot of land that you own, and there's quite a lot of customizing there's a lot more customizing that can be done. Problem is on the house side, how much is your investment going to cost? So now we distinguish when we're talking about houses today, when somebody talks about off-plan houses, we distinguish between that and a key-in-hand property. In other words, off-plan means that you're buying off-plan, you have an estimation of cost in regards to the house, but the final bill you will never 100% be able to calculate. Whereas a key-in-hand property, that's secured up front. So that's on. So houses, certainly in our area and certainly in our industry, we were working on the Silver Coast, key-in-hand has prominence as the premium product for people to invest in on the Silver Coast. But that doesn't take away from what we're doing. We're doing a huge amount of work on the off-plan, certainly in the apartment sector. A huge amount of customizing that's being done. It's taken a while to get developers to understand that this is the way the market has gone. It's certainly in the last 10 years, but gained prominence certainly in the last 5 years. You know, we don't buy our iPhone. Today, you choose the color of iPhone you want. You can change the covers. You can do all these kind of things. So people have become really accustomed to customizing. And yes, an iPhone is pretty much a good example to use. An apartment, there's a limitation to what you can do. You can't make the iPhone bigger. You can't add extra little cameras to it and stuff like this, but you can certainly change the colors. You can change the way it looks. You can change these kind of things. And so to get developers to understand that this is the way the market has gone. The reason why they do shy away from it is a real reason. Developers don't have the infrastructure to support customization. And that is where we come in. We give them that support. We their partners through the Simple Life Home Pack. We're the partners that will do that for them.
Okay. So let's just put a pin in a few things there. Simple Life Home Pack, we've got information about this on the Petishkus and on the podcast. So please go back and listen to those.
Yes.
And then definitely just to kind of differentiate, key in hand is more in line with houses, off plan, generally speaking, more to do with apartments.
Yes.
Okay. Next question. Why does something like off-plan make sense in today's market? We're seeing this being a very, very popular process for people. Why is it making so much sense right now?
I mean, there's a couple of reasons. The one is the customization, is that you're going to get an apartment to suit you. We've all had that experience where we go and buy a second-hand house or a second-hand apartment, and we get there and we go, oh man, this would be a really great apartment if the tiles weren't green. We all remember the blue bathrooms. I mean, who came out with that blue toilet and pink toilets and green, olive green? What color is that? So we've all had that experience where we go into a house or an apartment which was designed for someone else, to someone else's taste. The benefit that you can do with an off-plan apartment in this business model is that you can customize it to your taste. So that's the first thing. So your experience of your home is going to be a much, much better one. But then there are financial benefits of it, and they're really, really highlighting themselves right now. We've always, certainly in the last 20 years that I've been operating here in Portugal, the only time that this didn't happen was probably in the crisis between about 2010 to 2012. But generally what has happened is over the years, there's been an average of a 5% growth in the cost of construction year to year in Portugal. This has pretty much been the standard. The cost of construction, the raw materials in construction tend to go above the inflation rate. So if inflation is sitting at 2-3%, which is what it's been in Portugal, you can expect that construction would be at about 1.5% to 2% above that. So it always did make sense sorry about that. It always did make sense for people to do off plan, because if you were buying into a property which was 2 years in construction, let's say 24 months in construction, what you're doing in real terms from a financial perspective is you're locking in a price today for a property which is going to be, at least in terms of cost, it's going to be at least 10% more expensive than what it is today when you bought it. So there's that financial benefit. But what do we see now in the crisis, in this COVID crisis, is that, and often people don't know how to translate this. We see news we see the news and they say things like the price of iron ore is going up, the price of oil is going up. And it's very difficult to often translate that into how's that going to affect me in my own life. I think oil, people are a lot more sensitive to oil because they go to the petrol pump the next day and they feel it, a couple of cents more expensive. Where they don't realize and where they don't feel it, or they don't realize that it affects them, all construction requires, one, energy to produce cement. It requires iron ore, steel for various parts of the construction process. Aluminium is another one. A huge amount of aluminium goes into people's houses. We don't realize this. In the modern homes, we have a lot of insulation. Most of this insulation is based on petrochemicals. So we have different types of foams that we use to insulate the homes. You then go to the other energy saving, solar panels. All of these things take raw materials that in the last 6 months have just gone through the roof, to such a level that developers can't absorb this anymore. So those people that have bought properties or currently buying properties in an off-plan scenario, they've locked themselves in to a price which is, there's no question, will go right out of the park. And with all of the 20 years of experience that I have in this industry in Portugal, I cannot tell you where that market is going to go. The 5% is guaranteed, but there's very strongly it's going to go past that. People will often say, but hang on a second, we thought that Portugal was cheaper. What they don't realize that all of these raw materials are traded on the international market. So most aluminiums are imported. Most cements are sold at international prices. Steel is always sold at the international price. So all of these things. So if you're feeling these products becoming more expensive in your country, they most likely they're not most likely, they definitely are becoming more expensive in ours. So it's not that Portugal is more expensive, it's that the raw material is far more expensive. Fortunately for people who are investing in Portugal, fortunately our labor cost is lower than the rest of the world, by certainly a lot lower than the rest of Europe. So that's where people are seeing the benefit. But there are things that developers can't control, and labor they can to a certain degree, but raw materials they can't. Yeah. So the investment, from an investment point of view, looking at it as a cold investment, setting the emotional and the experience aside, from an investment point of view, it makes far, far more sense here. Okay,
so buying something in 2021 prices that will be yours in 2023, guaranteed 10% more expensive in that scenario. Yeah,
financially, yeah. That makes so much more sense. Mm-hmm. You then have the other benefit of Offplan, but I mean this is classic. It's the benefit has always been there. On the resale market, people tend to value their homes based on an emotional indicator. I always say to them, there's a return on investment and there's a return on ego. Have you ever visited somebody who didn't think that their house was beautiful, and you're looking and you've got your own opinion, you're like, oh my God, I would never live in here. But people always believe it's an emotional thing. It's what we do as human beings. We always believe that the home that we have is worth much, much more than its real market value. And you tend that the differences between developers and private owners, people who own their own homes, who've invested so much of themselves in their homes, there's a lot of emotional capital invested in their homes. Result is that a house that's on the resale market is being sold at a price which is inflated. Developers, on the other hand, are much cleaner in terms of how they look at things. It's a fallacy that developers just love to charge as much as possible. They would like to, I'm sure, if they were given the opportunity, but the reality is they are businesses. They build to sell. They don't build to hold, whereas the private owner can hold for 20 years if they want to. Developers are a much cleaner relationship, and therefore it shows, it reflects in the values and in the capital growth that you get on an off-plan property.
I mean, that leads us perfectly into some of the perceived risk that people will see or think about when it comes to buying off-plan. How can people listening secure themselves against some of the risks?
Let me just tell you that in most developments, certainly in the countries that I visited, including in Portugal, most development off-plan is done in stages. You make your initial 20 or 25% investment with the developer, and then you get to different levels in the development, and you then pay the developer. So they normally go structure, roof level, walls. They have different stages, and then you pay them. And normally developers, to secure clients, will keep a 20 or 25% bullet payment for the end, which people will do at the deed. We on the Silver Coast, we've made, because we're working with such big developers who are self-financed, which is one of the positives that actually came out of the previous crisis. We're not talking about COVID, we're talking about the global financial crisis, is that your good developers were forced to change their business model and become self-financing. So they have less reliance on the banks. So what we've been able to do with certain developers, not all, I mean, not everybody has the capacity. Actually, very few do have this capacity. But then we're able to get from the developer a bank guarantee to secure the monies that you pay the developer. So in the case of these developers, you go in with a relatively low investment, 25% normally as an entry. It will normally, as a maximum that it will go up to, is about 50% over a period of time. But in these cases, the developer gives a bank guarantee. This is very rare in the world of construction. It's certainly very, very rare in the world of development, and certainly extremely rare in off-plan. And we've managed to do this with reputable developers that have been around a very, very long time. So the risk is, the argument that people will often use is that they're using clients' money to build the property. This is not the case here, because obviously that money goes into a special account, which then secures the client's bank guarantee. And developers are not using your money. The real risk lies with the developer, actually, in these cases. The real risk lies in that the developer is going to build your apartment, in this case, that the developer is going to customize the apartment to your taste, and you come to the end and you've lost your money on Bitcoin, or the bank doesn't want to finance the balance, or your circumstances have changed. So there's a reversal of the roles. Fortunately, banks never ask for guarantees from clients. Not banks, at least. Developers never ask for guarantees from clients, because if they did, oh my God, it would make business really, really difficult. So, yeah.
Yeah, that wouldn't really work that well.
No.
All right, wonderful. Okay, David, thank you. I'm going to ask you a question about a petisco, because this is a petisco after all. Do you remember we ate a petisco at what they call the roulette, those caravans outside Sporting Stadium? We had those bifanas. That's one of the best petiscos ever. That was when I fell in love with Sporting, right then in that moment. It was great.
Yeah. And I remember that game. I fell in love with Sporting before then, but I remember the petisco. I'm addicted to bifanas. I know all the best bifana spots. They always tend to be little dingy little places that nobody else wants to go to. but you know that the sauce is really, really great. They put in lots of wine, lots of garlic, a little bit of spice, because the Portuguese don't like too much spice. But if you know the right guys, they put a little bit of spice, a little bit of a bite in there. Oh my God, my mouth is watering.
Good stuff. David, thank you so much.
Bill, you're welcome. Please invite me again. Great fun.
I'm going to let you call it.
That's a wrap.
Please follow the links available for more information about some of our amazing off-plan properties. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We'd love to hear from you. Welcome to The Simple Life.